I woke up that Tuesday morning absolutely convinced I was living in a reasonable world where a man could store his lawn equipment without triggering a suburban Cold War. I was wrong. So catastrophically, hilariously wrong. My name's Logan, and exactly 97 days ago, I submitted a permit application to the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association for a modest 10 by 12 foot shed. Nothing crazy, no turrets, no neon signs, no statue of myself flexing victoriously, just 4 walls and a roof to house my mower, some tools, and approximately 47 bags of potting soil I kept meaning to use, but never did. What I got back was a 4-page rejection letter printed on paper so thick it could have stopped a bullet, signed by Deborah Hutchins, HOA president and part-time human migraine. The reasons for denial included, and I'm not making this up, aesthetic disruption to neighborhood harmony, potential property value degradation, and my personal favorite, non-compliance with the Architectural Unity Vision Statement. We don't even have an Architectural Unity Vision Statement. I checked. Deborah made it up sometime between her morning Chardonnay and her afternoon Chardonnay. The letter went on for pages. Actual pages. She cited precedents from 1987, when someone tried to paint their shutters the wrong shade of beige. She referenced neighborhood character 17 times. She included a hand-drawn diagram showing how my proposed shed would visually impact Mrs. Patterson's view, despite Mrs. Patterson being 84, legally blind, and not having looked out her window since the Bush administration. The first one. So naturally, I appealed. I showed up to the next HOA meeting with revised plans, color swatches that matched every single house on the block, and a PowerPoint presentation that would have made a Fortune 500 CEO weep with envy. I had graphs. I had testimonials from other shed owners in America. I had architectural renderings from 3 different angles. I had a cost-benefit analysis that concluded the shed would, in fact, increase property values by precisely 0.003%. I'd even consulted with a color theory expert to ensure maximum aesthetic harmony. Deborah listened to my entire presentation with the expression of someone watching paint dry in slow motion, then said, and I quote, "The answer is still no, Logan. Perhaps you should learn to store your belongings more efficiently inside your existing structures." My garage was already full. Deborah knew this. Everyone knew this. I'd been parking my car in the driveway for 2 years because my garage looked like a Home Depot had explosive diarrhea in it. There were paint cans from projects I'd completed in 2018. There were Christmas decorations I hadn't unpacked in 3 years. There was a kayak I'd used exactly once before realizing I hate kayaking. My garage was a monument to poor life choices and impulse purchases, and no amount of efficient storage was going to fix. Buet. That's when Gary Kleinman, Deborah's second-in-command, and a man whose entire personality could be summed up as, "well, actually," chimed in with a smug little smile. "The covenants are quite clear about outbuildings, Logan. Perhaps you should have thought about storage before purchasing a home in a community with standards." Standards. This coming from a guy who hadn't trimmed his nose hair since the Clinton administration and whose front yard featured a garden gnome collection that could only be described as aggressively creepy. We're talking 47 gnomes. I counted. Some were fishing. Some were sleeping. One appeared to be doing yoga. It was a gnome apocalypse, and somehow that met community standards, but my shed didn't. I left that meeting with my jaw clenched so tight I could have cracked walnuts with my molars. But I'm a reasonable man, a patient man. So I went home, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, then poured 3 more, and started reading. The HOA Covenants. All 83 pages of them. These weren't just any covenants. These were covenants written by lawyers who clearly build by the word. Section 4, subsection 2, took 4 full pages to explain that you couldn't paint your house purple. There was an entire chapter dedicated to mailbox specifications. I learned more about approved shingle colors than I ever wanted to know. There were diagrams. There were appendices. There was a glossary of terms that included definitions for structure, semi-structure, structural element, and structurally adjacent improvements. And that's when I found it. Section 7, subsection 14, paragraph C. No outbuilding or external structure shall be erected without prior written approval from the HOA board. This includes, but is not limited to, sheds, gazebos, pergolas, detached garages, and above-ground permanent structures. Above-ground permanent structures. I read it again. And again. My bourbon suddenly tasted like victory. The covenant said nothing. Absolutely nothing. About below-ground structures. It was the most beautiful loophole I'd ever seen. Deborah and her legal team had spent so much time obsessing over what people could build on top of their property that they'd completely forgotten about what could go underneath it. I stayed up until 3 in the morning researching. Zoning laws, building codes, underground construction regulations, excavation permits, soil stability requirements, ventilation standards. I went down rabbit holes about bunker construction, wine cellar engineering, and something called subterranean residential enhancement. I learned that people build underground structures all the time, storm shelters, wine cellars, safe rooms, and that as long as you meet county building codes, it's perfectly legal. By dawn, I had a plan so beautifully petty, so magnificently spiteful, that I actually laughed out loud in my kitchen, startling my cat so badly he knocked over a plant and then glared at me, like this was somehow my fault. If Deborah wouldn't let me build a 120-square-foot shed above ground, I'd build something substantially larger below it. 2,000 square feet larger, to be exact. The first call I made was to my buddy Marcus, who runs a construction company and owes me big time for helping him move a piano up 3 flights of stairs in 2019. That piano weighed approximately 4,000 pounds and had more sharp corners than a geometry textbook. I threw out my back. He promised he'd owe me forever. Forever had arrived. I explained my vision, a fully underground facility directly beneath my front lawn. A bunker, essentially, but calling it a bunker sounded too apocalyptic. This was a sophisticated subterranean storage and entertainment complex. That sounded way better. Marcus was quiet for a solid 10 seconds. Then, "Dude, that's insane. Can you do it?" Another pause. I could hear him thinking, probably calculating costs and labor, and whether our friendship was strong enough to survive this madness. Yeah, I can absolutely do it. This is going to be expensive, though. Like, really expensive. Like, second mortgage expensive. I don't care. I'll take out a loan. I'll sell organs. I'll start a GoFundMe called Help Logan Spite His HOA. Whatever it takes. You're really this mad about a shed? Marcus, she sent me a 4-page rejection letter with 17 references to neighborhood character. She made me sit through a 30-minute presentation where Gary talked about architectural integrity while wearing a shirt with a ketchup stain on it. She told me to store my belongings more efficiently. I'm about to efficiently store them in a 2,000-square-foot underground fortress that technically doesn't violate a single covenant. I love it. When do we start? Tomorrow. We didn't start tomorrow. First, I had to pull permits from the county, the real permits from actual government officials who understood that underground structures are perfectly legal as long as they meet safety codes. This process took 3 weeks and tested my patience more than any HOA meeting ever had. I needed engineering assessments, soil tests, structural integrity reports, ventilation plans, electrical schematics, plumbing diagrams. I met with 4 different engineers, 2 geologists, a hydrologist who confirmed my property wasn't sitting on any underground springs, and an architect who specialized in subterranean construction and got visibly excited when I explained the project. "You're doing this because of an HOA dispute?" she asked, eyes wide. "They rejected my shed permit." She laughed so hard she snorted. "That's the best thing I've heard all year. I'm in. Let me design you something spectacular." Her name was Sarah, and she was a genius. She drew up plans for a 7-room underground facility with 12-foot ceilings, LED lighting systems that mimicked natural daylight, a state-of-the-art HVAC system, and structural supports that could theoretically support a tank driving over my lawn. Not that I planned on driving tanks over my lawn, but it was nice to know I could. The whole permit process cost $12,000 in fees, assessments, and consultations. $12,000 just for permission to dig a hole in my own yard. But I got them. Every single permit, signed and approved by the county building department, the fire marshal, the health department, and probably a few other bureaucrats I forgot about. The HOA covenants required I notify them of major property alterations. So I sent a formal letter to Deborah, carefully worded by a lawyer friend who thought this whole thing was hilarious. "Dear HOA Board, please be advised that I will be conducting landscaping improvements on my property beginning May 15th. All necessary county permits have been obtained. Please find attached documentation confirming compliance with local regulations. Sincerely, Logan." Landscaping improvements. Technically accurate, just very, very underground landscaping. I attached 37 pages of permit documentation, knowing full well Deborah would never actually read them. The woman once approved a fence that was 6 inches too tall because she didn't measure it. She was all about appearances, not details. The day Marcus's crew showed up with excavators, I stood in my driveway with coffee in hand, wearing my best "I'm not doing anything wrong" expression, watching them unload equipment with the giddy excitement of a kid on Christmas morning. They brought 2 excavators, 3 dump trucks, a concrete mixer, and enough construction equipment to build a small shopping mall. My neighbor Phil wandered over, coffee mug in hand, watching the scene with his usual unflappable demeanor. Phil is the kind of guy who could watch aliens land in his backyard and just shrug. Nothing phases him. "What's all this about?" "Landscaping project." "Looks like you're digging to China." "Nope, just making some improvements. Want to see the plans?" I showed him Sarah's architectural drawings. His eyebrows went up about half an inch, which for Phil was the equivalent of shocked amazement. "You're building a bunker." "An underground storage facility." "Because Deborah wouldn't let you build a shed." "Correct." He sipped his coffee, studying the plans. "How much is this costing you?" "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." "Fair enough. Can I use your workshop when it's done?" "My garage is tiny." "Absolutely." Phil shrugged and went back inside. God bless Phil. The man once waved at me while his house was literally on fire, completely unfazed. If everyone in the neighborhood had Phil's energy, we wouldn't need an HOA. But of course, everyone in the neighborhood does not have Phil's energy. By day 2, I had 3 different neighbors knocking on my door asking what I was doing. I gave them all the same answer. Landscaping improvements, all permitted, through the county. Mrs. Patterson, the legally blind woman whose view Deborah claimed to be protecting, shuffled over and asked what all the noise was about. "I'm building an underground facility, Mrs. Patterson." "Is it nice?" "It will be. Good for you, dear. Deborah's a pain in the ass. I loved Mrs. Patterson. By day 3, Deborah showed up. She stood at the edge of my property line, because stepping onto my property would have been trespassing, and Deborah knows I know my rights, with her arms crossed and her lips pursed like she'd been sucking lemons for breakfast. She was wearing her signature pantsuit, the one she wore to HOA meetings when she wanted to look extra authoritative. It wasn't working. Logan, what is this? Landscaping improvements, Deborah. Good morning to you too. This is not landscaping. This is excavation. Landscaping adjacent excavation. But yes, there's digging involved. That's how landscaping works sometimes. You cannot do this without HOA approval. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd sent her. I notified the HOA on May 3rd, right here. Landscaping improvements. That's 12 days' notice, which exceeds the 7-day minimum required by the covenants. Section 12, subsection 4, paragraph A, if you want to check. Her face went through several fascinating color changes. Purple, red, back to purple, then a shade I can only describe as crimson rage. This is not what that notification meant. It's what it said, though. Words matter, Deborah. You taught me that when you rejected my shed permit with a 4-page essay about architectural unity. I demand to know what you're building. I'm not building anything, Deborah. I'm improving my landscaping. Very deeply, very thoroughly, with full county approval. I pulled out the permit folder, all 37 pages, and handed it to her. She flipped through it, her expression growing increasingly confused. Building permits, engineering assessments, structural plans. Everything was in order, because I'd made damn sure everything was in order. Marcus chose that exact moment to fire up the excavator, drowning out whatever Deborah said next, though based on her hand gestures and the vein throbbing in her forehead, it was probably not a compliment. She stormed off, heels clicking on the pavement like angry Morse code. I went back to supervising, grinning like an idiot. The excavation took 2 weeks. Marcus and his crew dug a hole 40 feet wide, 50 feet long, and 12 feet deep, right in the center of my front lawn. It was glorious. A perfect rectangular crater that looked like a swimming pool for giants. Dump trucks came and went, hauling away approximately 300 tons of dirt. The neighbors gathered like it was a spectator sport. People brought lawn chairs. Someone set up a lemonade stand. The kids in the neighborhood acted like I'd built them an amusement park. One kid asked if he could dig, too. I let him operate a shovel for 5 minutes while his mom took pictures. Made his whole summer. Deborah sent me 4 emails during this period, each more unhinged than the last. The subject lines alone were works of art. Cease immediately. Legal action pending. Neighborhood ruination. And my personal favorite, you will regret this, Logan. Each email was longer than the last. The final one was 6 pages long and included phrases like flagrant disregard for community standards, willful destruction of property values, and architectural terrorism. Architectural terrorism. She actually wrote that. I responded to each one with unwavering politeness. Dear Deborah, thank you for your concern. All work is being conducted in full compliance with county regulations and HOA covenants. As you can see from the attached permits, every aspect of this project has been reviewed and approved by appropriate authorities. Best regards, Logan. Professional. Polite. Petty as hell. Once the hole was dug, the real work began. First, a foundation. Reinforced concrete walls, 18 inches thick, engineered to withstand earthquakes we don't even get in this region. Then the roof structure, essentially a massive concrete slab supported by steel beams, engineered to hold the weight of the entire lawn on top of it, plus any additional weight from, say, a fully loaded moving truck. or a tank, just in case. This wasn't some amateur hour operation. Marcus brought in structural engineers, concrete specialists, waterproofing experts, electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians. At one point, I had 23 people working on my property. It looked like a construction site for a government building. The county inspector came by weekly. He approved every phase. Foundation, approved. Structural walls, approved. Roof supports, approved. Waterproofing, approved. Electrical, approved. Plumbing, approved. HVAC, approved. Fire suppression system, approved. Gary Kleinman tried to file a complaint with the county, claiming I didn't have proper permits. The county inspector showed up, reviewed everything, found it completely up to code, and left. Then he came back 20 minutes later and asked if he could take pictures because he'd never seen a residential underground structure this well built and wanted to show his colleagues. Gary stood in his driveway, watching the inspector praise my construction, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. His 47 gnomes seemed to mock him from the yard. One of the fishing gnomes appeared to be laughing. By week 4, I had a fully constructed underground structure with multiple rooms, HVAC system powerful enough to cool a restaurant, electricity running through commercial-grade wiring, plumbing that could service a small hotel, and LED lighting that could have illuminated a small stadium. The entrance was a reinforced steel hatch, accessible from inside my garage, with a sturdy staircase leading down. There was also an emergency exit that opened to my backyard, hidden under what appeared to be a decorative boulder, but was actually a fiberglass shell mounted on hydraulic lifts. Sarah had designed the space brilliantly. Every room had a purpose. Every corner was utilized. It was like a luxury apartment, just underground and built entirely out of spite. Room 1. Actual storage. Industrial shelving units for my lawn equipment, tools, and those 47 bags of potting soil finally finding their purpose in life. Everything organized, labeled, perfectly arranged. Deborah wanted efficient storage. This was efficiency that would make a German engineer weep with joy. Room 2. Workshop. I'm talking full tool benches, a table saw, drill press, router table, every power tool known to man. Pegboard walls with every hand tool imaginable, organized by size and function. A dust collection system that cost more than my first car. This wasn't just a workshop. This was a cathedral of craftsmanship. Room 3. Man cave. 65-inch TV, surround sound system with speakers that cost more than most people's entire home entertainment setups, leather recliners that felt like sitting on clouds, mini fridge stocked with craft beer, and a poker table with professional-grade felt. The walls were insulated so well you could scream at full volume, and nobody above ground would hear a thing. Room 4. Wine cellar. Climate-controlled, humidity-regulated, capacity for 500 bottles. I didn't even drink that much wine, but now I was going to learn. I'd already ordered 200 bottles from a vineyard in Napa. When you're spending $380,000 out of spite, what's another few thousand for wine? Room 5. Gym. Commercial-grade treadmill, weight rack with enough plates to bench press a small car, exercise bike, rowing machine. Yoga mats. I'd probably never use, but looked professional. A full-length mirror and a sound system so I could blast motivational music while pretending to exercise. Room 6. Panic room/storage vault. Climate-controlled, biometric lock, steel-reinforced door, enough shelf space for important documents, valuables, and several months' worth of emergency supplies. Because if you're building an underground facility, you might as well make it apocalypse-ready. Room 7. Just an empty room I hadn't decided what to do with yet. Sarah suggested a library. Marcus suggested a home theater. Phil suggested a bowling alley. I was leaning toward a combination arcade and game room. The beauty of having 2,000 square feet underground is that you can afford to leave some of it unfinished while you figure out what ridiculous thing to add next. The total cost came to just under $380,000. Did I have $380,000? No. Did I take out a second mortgage large enough to make my accountant cry actual tears and question whether I'd suffered a head injury? Yes. Was it worth it? Absolutely. My accountant, Jerry, called me 3 times trying to talk me out of it. Logan, this is financial. Suicide. You're borrowing $380,000 to build an underground facility because you're mad about a shed. Jerry, it's not just about the shed. It's about principles. Principles don't pay mortgages, Logan. No, but they do build 2,000 square foot underground spite palaces that will outlast Deborah's presidency. He went quiet. Then, you know what? I respect that. You're insane, but I respect it. The final step was restoring the lawn on top. Marcus's crew laid down fresh soil, premium sod that cost $8 per square foot, a state-of-the-art sprinkler system with smart controls that would water based on weather patterns and soil moisture, and landscaping that made my yard look like it belonged in a magazine. They contoured it slightly to disguise the reinforced concrete roof underneath, adding gentle slopes that looked natural but were actually carefully engineered drainage systems. From the surface, my lawn looked perfectly normal, maybe even better than before. The grass was greener. The landscaping was professional. You'd never know that underneath it was a massive underground facility where I could theoretically survive the apocalypse while watching Netflix and drinking wine. The ventilation shafts were disguised as decorative rocks. The emergency exit looked like a natural boulder. The main entrance was completely hidden inside my garage. To anyone looking at my property, nothing had changed except my lawn looked phenomenal, and I'd apparently gotten really into gardening. I held an open house, not for the HOA. God, no. For everyone Deborah had annoyed, irritated, or wronged over her 5-year reign as president. Which, it turned out, was basically everyone except Gary, and even Gary was starting to have doubts about his allegiance. 32 neighbors showed up. I gave them the full tour, watching their faces go from confusion to disbelief to absolute glee as we descended the stairs, and they realized the scope of what I'd built. Phil stood in the man cave, beer in hand, shaking his head slowly. You dug a 2,000 square foot underground facility because Deborah wouldn't let you build a shed. Correct. That's the most petty thing I've ever seen. Thank you. I love it. Can I come over to watch football? Every Sunday. I'm thinking of making it a thing. Underground football Sundays. Bring beer, bring snacks, bring your complaints about Deborah. Margaret Chen, who Deborah once fined $500 for planting tulips in the wrong shade of red. Apparently there's an approved shade of red for tulips, who knew? Actually teared up when she saw the workshop. This is beautiful. This is art. Can I use the workshop for my pottery? Absolutely. I'll even help you set up a kiln down here if you want. Even old Mr. Pemberton, who was 93 and generally hated everything created after 1950, grunted approvingly while examining the structural supports. Good craftsmanship. Sturdy. These beams could support a house. They're supporting my lawn and my dreams of revenge. He chuckled, which might have been the first time I'd ever heard him make a sound that wasn't a complaint. Good for you, son. I've hated that woman for 15 years. This is the best thing that's happened to this neighborhood since they added the stop sign on Maple Street. The party lasted until midnight. We played poker in the man cave with Phil winning $200 from a pot. I'm pretty sure he cheated to get, but I was too drunk to care. We watched a movie with the surround sound so loud, I'm surprised it didn't register on seismographs. We drank approximately 30 bottles of wine from my new wine cellar, and Margaret got so tipsy she started singing show tunes in the empty room. It was glorious. It was perfect. It was everything a $380,000 spite project should be. Deborah found out, of course. Several neighbors who attended immediately told her not to be mean, but because watching her reaction was too entertaining to miss. The next HOA meeting was legendary. People still talk about it. Some call it the reckoning. Others call it the night Logan broke Deborah. I just call it Tuesday. I showed up 5 minutes late, carrying a folder full of documentation, permits, engineering reports, structural assessments, inspection certificates, and a printed copy of the HOA covenants with Section 7, Subsection 14, Paragraph C highlighted in neon yellow so bright it could have guided aircraft. Deborah was already mid-rant when I walked in. Flagrant disregard for community standards, property values will plummet. This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated. Underground facilities are clearly against the spirit of... I sat down, opened my folder, and waited. Several neighbors who'd been at my open house were trying not to smile. Gary eventually noticed me. "Logan, how nice of you to join us. Wouldn't miss it. Sorry I'm late. Had to lock up the underground facility. You know how it is." Deborah spun around so fast I'm surprised she didn't get whiplash. This is your fault. What you've done is a violation of... Which covenant? What? Which specific covenant have I violated? I'll wait. She sputtered. Actually sputtered. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish trying to understand calculus. You built a massive underground thing. A storage facility, for my belongings, which you suggested I store more efficiently. I took your advice, Deborah. I'm storing them very efficiently now, in 2,000 square feet of climate-controlled underground space. Not like this. How did you want me to store them? Interpretive dance? A strongly worded poem? You rejected my shed permit. You told me to use my existing structures. Technically, dirt is an existing structure. I just made some improvements to it. Section 7, Subsection 14, Paragraph C. I slid a copy across the table. The covenant prohibits above-ground permanent structures without approval. I built a below-ground structure, with full county approval, with licensed contractors, with engineering oversight that would make NASA jealous. Gary grabbed the paper with trembling hands, read it, and went pale. Actually pale. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. This doesn't mean you can just dig a massive hole in your lawn. Actually, according to county code and verified by 4 different inspectors, 3 engineers, and 1 very enthusiastic architect, it does, as long as it meets structural and safety requirements, which mine exceeds. I pulled out another document with the satisfied flourish of a magician revealing a particularly good card trick. Inspector's report, signed and approved. Would you like to review it? It's fascinating reading. Lots of words like exceptional and exemplary and significantly exceeds minimum requirements. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Someone in the back row coughed. Deborah's mouth opened and closed like a fish. This is ridiculous. The spirit of the covenant, clearly, the spirit of the covenant isn't legally binding, Deborah. The actual words are. and the actual words say nothing about underground structures. Trust me, I read all 83 pages, twice. I can quote Section 4, Subsection 2 about purple houses if you want. It's 4 pages long and mentions the word purple 47 times. We could amend the covenants, Gary said weakly, grasping at straws like a man drowning in bureaucratic defeat. Sure. That requires a 2/3 vote from all homeowners in the subdivision. Good luck getting that when 32 of them were at my open house last weekend and loved it. Several of them asked for my contractor's number. Phil's planning something similar for a home theater. Margaret wants an art studio. The Johnsons are talking about a wine cellar. You're about to have an underground neighborhood, and there's nothing you can do about it. That landed like a bomb. Several board members looked at each other nervously. You had an open house? Deborah's voice cracked. Yep, gave tours, served wine from my new wine cellar. Expensive wine. We played poker, watched movies. Margaret sang show tunes. Everyone thought it was fantastic. Phil's coming over Sunday for football. Margaret wants to use my workshop for her pottery. Mr. Pemberton said, and I quote, "Good craftsmanship, sturdy." High praise from a man who hasn't complimented anything since Eisenhower was president. Deborah looked like she was having a stroke. Her left eye twitched. You cannot be serious. Completely serious. Oh, and I'm throwing a 4th of July party down there. You're not invited, but everyone else is. I'm hiring a caterer. There's going to be a DJ. We're installing a full bar next week. It's going to be legendary. I stood up, gathered my documents with the casual confidence of someone who'd just won a war, and headed for the door. Logan, Deborah's voice cracked slightly. We are not finished here. I turned back, hand on the doorknob. Yeah, we are. You denied my shed permit. I adapted. That's how this works. That's how everything works. Maybe next time someone submits a reasonable request for a 10 by 12-foot storage building, you'll think twice before sending them a 4-page rejection letter about architectural unity vision statements that don't exist, and neighborhood character that apparently includes 47 gnomes, but not a single modest shed. Gary was rereading the covenant section, his face growing increasingly gray, like he was watching his entire worldview collapse in real time. He's right. There's nothing in here about underground structures. We never thought to include it because who would dig a 2,000-square-foot underground facility out of spite? I finished. This guy. That's who. And before you ask, yes, it's already added value to my property. My realtor called it unique and highly desirable. Property values aren't plummeting, Deborah. If anything, they're going up. Turns out people like having extra space, even if it's underground. The meeting fell apart after that. Half the board wanted to explore legal options. The other half realized there weren't any. Deborah sat in silence, which might have been the first time in recorded history she'd gone 60 seconds without speaking. It was magical. I went home, descended into my climate-controlled underground palace, and cracked open a $200 bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Marcus came over. We played poker until 2 a.m., and I lost a 150, but I didn't even care. You know they're going to try something, he said, studying his cards with the focus of a man who took poker way too seriously. Let them. I've got every permit, every approval, every inspection report. I've got structural engineers who'll testify this thing could survive a nuclear blast. I've got photographs, timestamps, email records documenting every communication. I've got receipts for every expense. I'm bulletproof. Still, Deborah seems like the type to hold a grudge. Oh, definitely. But here's the thing. I don't care. She made this personal when she rejected a perfectly reasonable shed request with a 4-page essay about architectural harmony. Now I've got a 2,000-square-foot entertainment complex under my lawn, and there's literally nothing she can do about it except seethe." Marcus grinned, laying down a full house and raking in my chips. "You're insane." "Nah, I'm efficiently storing my belongings in my existing structures, just like she suggested. I'm being exceptionally efficient." The fallout was spectacular and lasted for months. Deborah tried to call an emergency meeting to discuss underground construction restrictions. Only 8 people showed up, and 6 of them voted against her proposal. You can't restrict something that's already legal and already built. The HOA couldn't amend the covenants without broader support, and I'd already won the PR battle decisively. Gary resigned from the board 2 weeks later. He sent an email saying he was pursuing other opportunities, but everyone knew he was just tired of losing. Rumor has it he moved to a condo in Florida, where the HOA only cares about parking spaces and holiday decorations. His 47 gnomes went to a yard sale. Phil bought 3 of them, ironically. 3 other neighbors submitted permit applications for underground structures. Deborah rejected them all, citing the same vague, neighborhood character nonsense she'd used on me. They all appealed directly to the county, got approved, and started digging. Within 6 months, our subdivision had 4 underground facilities. Phil built a massive home theater with seating for 20. Margaret constructed an art studio with skylights disguised as garden features that actually improved her yard's appearance. The Johnsons made a wine cellar that put mine to shame. It had space for 2,000 bottles and a tasting room with a bar. Our neighborhood became locally famous. A newspaper ran a story. "Suburban subdivision goes underground after HOA dispute." The article featured my property prominently. My underground facility was described as ingeniously spiteful and architecturally impressive. Deborah was quoted, but refused to comment beyond saying she maintained concerns about property values. Property values didn't plummet. If anything, they increased. Turns out, home with 2,000 square FT underground edition is a major selling point, not a liability. 3 houses in our subdivision sold that year, and all 3 realtors mentioned the underground structures as unique amenities that attracted buyers. Deborah tried to fine me for excessive noise during construction. I pointed out the construction was completed months ago, and also that every piece of equipment was operated within permitted hours. I sent her a detailed log showing that all work occurred between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. on weekdays, exactly as specified by county noise ordinances. She tried to fine me for unauthorized modification to property appearance. I sent her before and after photos showing my lawn looked objectively better than it had before the project. I also sent photos of every other yard on the block for comparison. Mine was the nicest. Even she couldn't argue with that. She tried to claim I was running a business out of my home because neighbors kept visiting. I invited the county inspector to verify I wasn't operating any commercial enterprise, receiving money for services, or conducting any business activities. He came, looked around my underground facility, complimented my workshop again, accepted a beer, watched 10 minutes of a football game, and left. His official report stated, "No evidence of commercial activity. Resident appears to be using property for personal recreation and storage as permitted. Every attempt failed. Every complaint got dismissed. Every threat evaporated under the slightest scrutiny. The 4th of July party was legendary. It's still talked about. People who weren't even there claimed they were. 60 people showed up. We had to implement a rotation system because the fire code only allowed 35 people underground at once. I'd checked. I was following every regulation because at this point, spite was a science, and I was a dedicated researcher. We had a full bar with a professional bartender, catered food from the best BBQ place in town, a DJ who took requests, a poker tournament with a $500 prize pool that Phil won again, and I'm convinced he's cheating but can't prove it. Someone brought fireworks. We watched them from the backyard, then retreated underground where the sound system made it feel like we were in a movie theater experiencing artillery fire. Deborah called the cops for a noise complaint at 9:30 p.m. The officer showed up, checked his decibel meter from the street, found we were well within legal limits, and then asked if he could get a tour. I showed him around. He was particularly impressed by the panic room. "You built this because of an HOA dispute?" They rejected my shed permit. He laughed so hard he had to lean against the wall. Actual tears formed in his eyes. "That's amazing. That's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. My HOA won't let me paint my mailbox. I should do something like this." "I can give you Marcus's number." "Please do." He left without writing any citations. Deborah called the police again at 11 p.m. A different officer showed up, got the same tour, had the same reaction, and also asked for Marcus's number. By the end of summer, Deborah resigned as HOA president. Just quit. Sent an email on a Wednesday afternoon saying she was stepping down to focus on personal matters. Translation: she got tired of losing every single battle and having the entire neighborhood laugh at her. Gary was already gone. The board was in shambles. The new president is Phil. His first official act was approving a shed permit for a new resident who just moved in. His second act was hosting meetings at a local bar instead of the community center because, in his words, meetings are more tolerable with beer, and Dave here makes great wings. Best president we've ever had. HOA meetings now have a 90% attendance rate because people actually want to go. As for me, I'm sitting in my underground man cave right now, writing this on my laptop while a football game plays on the 65-inch screen and Phil's homemade chili simmers in the kitchen area I added last month. There's a poker game starting in an hour. Margaret's bringing her famous brownies. Phil's bringing a keg. Mr. Pemberton is bringing his grandson, who apparently makes a mean brisket. The Johnsons are bringing wine from their new cellar for a taste test. My lawn above looks perfect. My storage below is immaculate. My tools are organized with the precision of a military operation. My workshop is functional and fully equipped. My wine cellar is stocked with 312 bottles and counting. And somewhere, probably in her house 3 streets over, Deborah is drinking Chardonnay and seething that her tyrannical reign ended because she couldn't just let a man build a modest shed. The permit for that shed, by the way, still framed on my wall down here, right next to the first page of the HOA covenant with Section 7, subsection 14, paragraph C highlighted. A reminder that spite, properly channeled and meticulously planned, can create something truly magnificent. Was it excessive? Absolutely. Was it necessary? Debatable. Was it worth every single penny of that $380,000 loan? Every meeting with engineers? Every hour of construction? Every document filed? Every permit approved? Every sleepless night worrying about whether I'd lost my mind? You're damn right it was. Next week, I'm installing a hot tub in the gym room. Deborah can't stop me. The county already approved it. Phil's installing a sauna in his underground theater. Margaret's adding a pottery kiln that cost more than my first car. The Johnsons are building a whole second level to their wine cellar. We're the underground subdivision now. We've embraced it. Someone made t-shirts. Phil's wearing his right now. Welcome to suburban warfare, folks. Where the battles are petty, the victories are sweet. And the real power move isn't revenge. It's reading the fine print and using it to dig a hole so deep that your enemies can't climb out of the metaphorical one you've put them in. Deborah wanted neighborhood character? She got it. Just 12 feet below ground level,